Oh, oh, there's been an update about the situation about the game. Uh-oh.
What up, boys? So with the recent roadmap announcement, there is something people are focused on overshadowing the positives that were shown. So I want to get the controversy out the way first so we can focus on what matters. Farming copium and converting that to ad revenue to fuel my pizza addiction. But before we get into that, sit back, relax, and grab yourself a Cola, because $120 to test a game that quite literally doesn't exist is our subject of focus today.
That's right.
Being covered by, basically, all the creators not huffing Steven's farts. So let's discuss this, because I'm not quite sure why this is suddenly riling everyone's feathers. Ashes of Creation has been a cesspit of money-grabbing FOMO since day one. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin, shall we?
I think one of the reasons why it happened is also because of the, like, it's like a good one-to-one when you look at, for example, Ubisoft charging like $120 or $130 for a finished game, and they're charging $120 to play an unfinished game. A lot of price frustration has to do with anchoring and value proposition. Like, in order to understand, like, the last thing that you should do when a person looks at a price and complains about it is change the price. That's my opinion. You need to change the value, and you need to change the way they look at that value.
So, with the recent announcement of Alpha 2 keys returning at the colossal price of $120, $110, and $100 for their respective phases, which, by the way, for clarification's sake, as I see a lot of people confused about this, if you buy one phase, you do gain access to all future phases, as well as the beta phases, as confirmed by Steven on Reddit recently. But I digress.
But that was not the initial launchment, and it was explicitly stated that getting into the alpha was not getting into the beta, and they changed it because of the negative feedback, which was smart, and they should have done that. That was a good decision.
A lot of interesting takes have been coming out from various outraged content creators.
I think that it's very obviously capitalizing on FOMO.
It's wild that we will be paying this sort of money to test someone's game for them.
Now that is quite high. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's quite a lot just for an Alpha 2.
I've never seen a testing period phase sale as bad as this. Never.
Interesting takes, guys, but allow me to introduce you to 7 months ago, when the prices for these keys were actually pushed with a bunch of vaporware FOMO cosmetics for $250, and nobody bats an eyelid. FOMO,
for those people didn't know about it. It's not because people were okay with it. It just wasn't talked about. Like, there's a lot of cases where things like get by. Like, this happens a lot with like emotes and like Twitch, where like somebody's emote gets reported and then they show somebody else's emote. But the truth is that they were both breaking the rules and the people only saw one of them. I don't think that it's an instance of like people being okay with one and not the other. I think the difference is that, and I think also another reason that the reason why people got mad about it is because of the doublespeak that Steven was using that a lot of people could kind of see. Like, for example, saying that it's not for access to the game, and it's like you're not playing a game. Well, then why is there a lowered price for each different tier that's based off of the time that you get into the game? Well, the reason why is so you can capitalize on FOMO. They're creating FOMO as a value add and defining it themselves, which is fine. It's totally okay to do that, but don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. There's no FOMO, you retard? Oh, he got banned? Yeah. If there was no FOMO, you know who you should tell that to? You should tell that to the people that designed the pricing for the game. Yeah, just tell them that, because they're the ones that don't understand that. That's why they priced it that way.
For you who don't know, means fear of missing out. A very common
Yeah.
and exploitative tactic used by the gaming industry and real-life retailers alike.
They
It
do.
preys on natural human psychology to create
does.
false scarcity that drives you to make a purchase you might not
Which is
have
true.
made for fear of, yes, you've guessed it,
Missing
out on exclusive items.
Real shit.
Prior to Alpha 1, access to the game was being sold for $500. Also jacked up by a shitload of cosmetics that don't exist, and I've been stirring up a stink.
To be fair, access to the game was not sold. It was a purchase pack that if you supported it, it gave you access. So, and it was stated multiple times that buying this should not be seen as purchasing access to the game. It's just that if you give people the option to do something, you can't be surprised when they do it.
About this practice ever
Customer's
since
always
back
right, yeah.
then. I simply do not agree with Ashes of Creation's monetization methods, and that's why I've never used any of their pyramid scheme style referral codes, and I will continue to never use.
Somebody says, how's your audience so poor? You know what I think? I actually think my audience has a lot of money. I think a lot of my viewers are actually pretty well off. And the reason why I think that is because whenever I would raise money for charities, we would blow everybody else out of the water and it wouldn't even be close. Like we would 2 or 3x everybody else's money. A lot of my viewers are a lot older and they make a lot of money. Like when I went to the anime convention, do you want to know the 2 guys that I talked to the most? Was the guy that ran IT for the convention and the guy that owned the convention center. They were viewers. So no, I don't think that it's a bunch of like, my audience isn't poor, but that is the reason why they're upset about it, is because people that are well off and that have money understand the value of that money very well. That's one of the reasons why they have the money. They have better financial literacy.
them. But just take the bag, bro, otherwise someone else will. Take what bag? You only get benefits when the game actually launches, and I'll be grave dust in my coffin by the time that happens. But Steven and his team have always claimed that they don't need our money, that the game is already fully funded by his infinite bank of holding, and that you should not purchase these keys.
The bottom line is, I am committed to this project's success and completion. And that means that when it comes to funding for the additional years that perhaps were not planned for, that's coming out of mine and John's pocket.
But then he'll gush in the very same live stream about how amazing this world boss is, how impressive these story arcs are, and how the game is starting to feel really great, guys. But that is just standard exploitative FOMO tactics. Here's the problem with these keys and why people don't agree with it. Intrepid changed the whole meaning of what this Alpha 2 was supposed to be and what they spent 8 years selling it as. People who spent the money were expecting the Alpha 2 launch to be a fully persistent game as stated by themselves in their Kickstarter. And I quote, "Alpha 2 phase is planned as a persistent testing phase of the game. This means access to the testing servers will remain open and available until launch." You can't just change the meaning of that 2 months before the launch, slap a $120 price tag on it, and think everyone is going to be okay with it.
I think our Alpha 2 has over 100.
Like, for me, that actually isn't even a concern. I think that Narc is bringing up a good point that I agree with, but to me, I feel like there are 4 stages of what I consider to be what should be a good MMO release, outside of the unicorn standard of the game just comes out randomly and it's amazing. Alpha, beta, stress test weekend before the launch, and the launch of the game. And I feel like games that go through this, like this standard, that is the good way of doing it. That's the smart way of doing it.
1,000 people that have purchased into it, so
That
it's
the 4 stages of grief. Yeah, no, those are the 4 stages, and it's like, you know, denial, and so you're still on stage 4, right? Where it's like bargaining or something like that, or, you know, whatever. And then stage 5 is when the game releases, and then that's acceptance that it was actually bad, and you've invested your emotional energy into a bad game for 2 years. It's called New World.
pretty significant testing event.
Yeah,
And
we
that's-
were
and
originally
obviously
going
that explodes.
30,000.
I know.
Now it's
Obviously, that explodes when we get closer to Alpha 2 testing.
Is the 100,000 testers you had back in January 2023 not enough testers for you to get proper feedback? What other developer has had the privilege of having over 100,000 testers to ensure their systems are presentable to the public? We're right off the back of massive Kickstarter scams like Chronicles of
I remember
Valeria,
that one. I
Dreamworld,
watched
and
that video.
Camelot Unchained. So it's
To
paramount.
be fair, Dreamworld was like so astronomically bad, it's not even worth categorizing it as a game.
that Ashes of Creation avoids the same tropes these games went through or risk being labeled the same
It was
as them,
worse than
regardless
Superman
of how good
64.
the game looks or how impressive their team is. A good game alone isn't enough to succeed in this age of social media. Large content creators can literally tear your game down at the whiff of some blood money. Your public perception matters a lot. Instead of learning from
Public perception matters a lot, but I will offer a counterpoint. The League of Legends Faker $500 skin. You want to know what matters even more? Is if the game is good and the product is being delivered to the audience in a way that they feel like they're being taken care of in. Content creators do not change opinions. Content creators might cultivate opinions slightly. They might be able to shift what people are thinking a little bit, but they're not going to be able to tell you that blue is green. The only thing they can say is maybe this blue is a little bit brighter than you initially thought it was.
mistakes and growing as a company, like I'm trying to help them understand
Can't put
through various
lipstick on a
videos.
pig.
They choose to bury their head in the sand and pretend everything is okay. Everything is not okay, but it's okay to admit that. In every single one of my videos addressing community concerns, I explicitly state that we still support Intrepid and we hope that they take our concerns and learn from them, like they promised
This
they
is one of the most unhealthy things that games can have, is toxic positivity. I think that a really great example of this is when Genshin Impact never had a rested experience system at all, and then Honkai Star Rail brought in a new audience of people who didn't have the same type of cuckold conditioning that Genshin players did, and then they wanted rested experience, and then they immediately added it into the game. And I think that now it's either being added or it's already been added into Genshin as well. And so toxic positivity is actually in a lot of ways worse than toxic negativity. It hasn't. Not yet.
would these
I think they
last
said they were
3
going to,
years.
right?
Nobody is asking Intrepid for dates on this roadmap. Nobody
Just
asked
asked
you,
otherwise, yeah.
Stephen, to drop a quarter announcement last year. Nobody put a gun to your head and asked you to do this like some people are
I
claiming.
thought it was another game. Yeah, it was Wuthering Waves that added it. I think the same point is the same. Is that when customers expect better, they get better. A great example is this is Shadowlands. My understanding is, did Genshin say they weren't going to add it? I thought they said they were going to. They're adding it soon in Zenless Zone Zero? Yeah. Said nothing about it. So maybe I'm thinking, I might be actually just thinking of Zenless Zone Zero.
Because I think there was a gun to their head, and it was a lot of
They
community
increased the
people.
limit?
I
Yeah,
think
they did
sometimes
both.
Intrepid Studios, or maybe just Steven, forgets the audience that he's trying to appeal to. The jaded MMO veterans who are desperate for a good MMO, and the younger audiences who have heard the amazing stories of how good an MMO can be. Is it really surprising that people who have spent the last 20 years being screwed over again and again and again by corporate are acting defensive and hostile when you're hell-bent on using deceptive marketing practices and avoiding the truth? Because that's all we want. The truth.
I think that Steven and the team could have done such a better job by just saying, guys,
That's me.
listen, running this shit's expensive. It's taken longer than we've expected. Inflation is high. We're low on money. We're charging $120 for the alpha.
You can't start preaching to content creators and your so-called wholesome fan base to defend your bad decisions when you're terrified to tell us the state of the game. These problems that are arising
Yeah.
right now, this huge explosion of controversy, are the exact things...
I think also you've got to keep in mind the age of the audience. How many people do you think that are excited for it? Like, if you take a Venn diagram of men who are balding and people who are excited for Ashes of Creation, I'm pretty sure you're almost going to have a circle. So, like, a lot of us, we've seen this. Like, we're not like 17-year-old kids, right? Like, we've bought a used car before, you know? We know what's going on.
Was trying to preach in my video. The exact things that I knew were coming if Intrepid continued to ignore outstanding concerns from the community. And don't get me wrong, right? Obviously, game development is difficult, and Ashes of Creation is an incredibly ambitious game, but you can't expect people to care when you've tried to milk them with Kickstarter packs you claimed would have the game released by 2020, a monetized battle royale with a battle pass containing cosmetics that don't even exist in your game anymore, so you had to make refunds, a $500 Alpha 1 testing phase that you claimed helped development, but now seemingly has no relevance to the current Alpha 2 due to nothing actually existing from that phase, followed by 3 years of selling FOMO $250 access to a test we still can't play.
I do think that the Alpha 1 test probably helped them a lot in terms of architecture. Like, it might not have helped them in terms of, like, how to design, like, a world, right? But I think that it probably was very insightful in terms of the architecture that it provided.
A $120 Alpha 2 key that has nothing else attached to it except promise of an unplayable, bug-ridden alpha test that cannot be criticized after 8 years because it is, after all, only an alpha. Can you really not see why there's a backlash here? Consequences to your actions is what normal people call it. Ultimately, I just want the game to be good. And if this Alpha 2 ends up being 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, guess what? I'm still going to be here, giving Intrepid Studios feedback, preaching against these scummy monetization practices, and working my ass off 18 hours a day, trying to pay my rent, making videos for a game that quite literally doesn't exist, because I am just one nerd, desperate for a good MMO. And I'd have hoped the audience I've grown over the last 4 years, built off the back of Ashes of Creation, would be enough to help Intrepid see how many people like me there really are. I simply cannot support the monetization methods chosen to fund this game, and I've said this for the last...
I don't really care how they monetize the game as long as it doesn't affect the actual gameplay, but I do think that the next great MMO that's transcendent in the same way that WoW is will not have paid cosmetics. I think that cosmetics matter a lot more than people think they do.
4 years, but I will continue to root for the team at Intrepid Studios as they're clearly cooking up a fantastic game that I believe will shake up this genre, because I'm high on copium.
There it is. Professional eaters. It's not a good value. It's all fake. They've tricked you into believing a lie and living inside of a box that they built to make money. Stop doing that. Yeah, true. True, so true. Now, Ashes of Creation has dialed back a little bit of this, and they're trying to become, more reasonable with the community. I think this is a good idea. And I also want to say this is a result of the feedback that we've given them, and I think that's exactly why we gave the feedback. The reason why people are giving the feedback is because they want the game to be good. They are excited about the game. They're enthusiastic about it. It's not like people want the game to fail. Nobody wants it to fail. Does that combat in Ashes of Creation look scuffed to you? Yeah, it does. It doesn't look that great, but it looks good enough to where, like, I would probably try it out and see how it goes. But it's good enough to where, like, yeah, I would at least give it that pass. But is the combat enough to where, like, it's amazing? Absolutely not. No, I think they've got a long way to go. But as somebody who's followed the project for a long time, I'm faithful about the direction of the game because I've seen how it's evolved over the years. So yeah, that needs a lot of work. Yeah, it is. And so, like, the $120 for it and everything, I don't really think that they should have even talked about it in the broadcast. I feel like just the entire thing was a big mistake. The endgame of MMO is transmog amounts. Selling cosmetics and selling your in-game identity is the ending of the long-term life of the game. I agree with you. So a really good example of this is, like, in WoW. Like, or look at real life. How do they project wealth? Well, It's really simple. They buy expensive things that people know are expensive. Most cars that are $250 that go really fast, you can't go that fast in the car. There's two reasons for that. Number one, you'll get arrested. And number two, a lot of them have governors in them that make it where you can't go over like 160 miles an hour. A $250,000 car. That's what I mean. A $250 car. Yeah, I almost had one of those before. Yeah, they're status symbols. So like almost every single example in real life of somebody having something special is actually a status symbol, whether it's a Gucci bag or, designer clothes, a Rolex watch. Who the fuck needs a Rolex watch? Everybody has a smartphone. What time is it? It's 3:10 p.m. Like, I don't need a watch for that. That's stupid. Why would I want to have a watch? But people have it as a status symbol because they want to look good. And so that's the reason people take themselves seriously. Yeah, but a lot of people do that. And I think that everybody does that to an extent, right? The point is that a lot of people have a very big value attachment that they have to cosmetic items. And I think that games selling cosmetic items is a massive red flag because it completely destroys the visual progression of the game. And I think the visual progression of the game is incredibly important. Oh, let me link the video real quick, too. Make sure to give it a like. It's good to see Narc calling this out as one of the most noteworthy Ashes of Creation creators. Keeping this stuff accountable and trying to make the game better, right? Which is what matters the most.